are here. So the first one, using the volume builder, I started with the primitive object. I'm going to try a different approach here. I'm going to start with using a spline. And I'll use the simplest one here, just a rectangle. Let me zoom out here. I want to build this up just as if it was on the wheel, if you want to think of it that way. So I don't want it facing forward or side to side. I want to face it. I want it facing up, right? So it's on it, resting on the ground, if you want to think of it that way. Okay, so just with that rectangle there, I'm going to copy and paste just to create another one and move it up, and just so that I can do this in very specific sizes or whatever. I'm going to move it up 400 centimeters. Now, these are 400 by 400 width and height. Obviously, that might be a little bit large for for a pot or something like that. So, but it's nice that you could dial these in specific sizes. So, what I want to do is use these splines to generate an object. So, Vaughn, I can see you already used a subdivision surface, right? There are a bunch of other generators. These are things that create geometry one way or the other. And the one I want to use here is the Loft, which the icon kind of gives it away. The white thing is a curve and another curve and another curve. And what it does is stretch a skin across that surface if they're positioned the right way. So I'll go ahead and choose that. And I'm just going to dump these in here, right? So rectangle is the one on the bottom, right? And here's the one on the top. Now, so the nice thing about this is I can change these and have it interpret, what is happening across the surface. So maybe on this upper rectangle, I will tell it to go ahead and have some rounding, make it maybe even kind of pronounced. And maybe in the coordinates, I've already moved it up 400. What if I rotate this? And let's just do it like 30 degrees, right? So I get a twist out of that. And underneath the display, I can change the shading from just the material surface to shading that also has the lines on it. And the hotkeys are N and A and B. So if I just tell my keyboard NB, I can see what the surface detail of this is like. And it looks a little clunky, right? So again, because I'm going to put this in a volume object here in a second, it's going to have a lot of dense geometry. It doesn't really matter if I create a whole bunch of geometry here. I don't really need to be efficient. So I'll go to the object again, and there's these subdivisions that I could have, right? So maybe I'll just say this is 64, and this one's 36. Oops, not that one. This one, 36. I'll leave this one 10. So I have maybe this. Let's just do 64 by 64. Really. 128. Right, so you have lots of geometry in here to help with that surface. So, okay, so that looks kind of interesting, right, as a start. Maybe what I'll do is duplicate this one. I'm going to do copy and paste and put that in there so I have another duplicate of that, and I'll just stretch it up. Right, and right, so I get just enough detail between these. And of course, part of this is like where do you want to put that distance so it's equal in here. So if this one, let's just say it's 500, let's make this one 250, right? So you just get kind of an even distribution about that. The other thing I want to do is maybe taper this. So I'm going to take this rectangle and let's make it 200 by 200. Right, so I get kind of this pinched, fluted thing. Let's do maybe 300. 300. All right, so that's got some interesting things. I kind of like that as a form. I'll call that good. All right, so what I want to do is put this in a volume object, and there's different ways I can construct this. The nice thing about the volume is once I get this surface, maybe the other things I could do to cut into it in unique ways. And I'll demonstrate that here in a minute maybe. So let's just go back to that same menu and we'll create a volume builder and we'll create a volume mesher, right? And we'll just put the loft within the builder. right? And let's just make it like 3 centimeters. And let's take the builder and put it into the mesher, right? And I'm going to turn N, oops, sorry, I didn't want that one. I want N and A, right? So I'm just get rid of the wireframe on there, right? So you can see I have this surface. It's a volume object, right? So I can cut things in out of it if I need to. I'm going to go back to the bottom one. I'm going to turn on rounding here just at the bottom, but just do it kind of tight, right? And maybe this one, maybe I make that kind of tighter there. And then the one at the top, just kind of playing with, right? So it gets really rounded. Okay, so this is interesting. You know, I could, boy, there's just so many little things I could do to kind of play with this form one with the other. Okay, so I guess the main thing here is, if I wanted to, I could create a, let's just create a sphere. And I'll put the sphere in the builder object, and again, I'll make this subtraction. And for the sphere, I could give it a bunch of 128, right, to make it nice and smooth. Right, so I can cut out of the object kind of in an interesting way. And maybe that's something I will play with here in a little bit. But what I really want to do is just hollow that out kind of in a perfect way. And several different ways we could do this for now. Let's just delete that sphere. So what I'm going to do is duplicate the loft, right? So this is making this outer side. I'm going to copy and paste so I get a second one and put it in there. And I'm going to name this loft cut. And it's inside the builder. So here's this little trick. In fact, what I'm going to do is just disable this one. A little bit ago, we were using this in the first video, smooth. There's also a smooth with this, it's this dilate or erode. So I'm just going to put this in here. And what I can do is, let's just do something a little bit larger. You can see the surface expands, or I could do like -10 or something. I can get it to contract inside of it itself. So I'm going to make this like -20 maybe. I'll just leave that there. Let's see if I've blown it up. Oh, and I need to, let's hide this one. There we go. Sorry. Turned it off down here, just not up in the viewer. So you can see that this is making it smaller. And it's just basically taking whatever the direction the surface is moving, and it moves it out or inward. It's along what would be called the normal. It's like the direction that the skin is facing of the surface, right? Okay, so how do I use this to my advantage so I can cut something out, right? Let's go back to, let's make this visible. All right, so what I want to do is dilate this one, the cutter, and I want to leave the base where it's at. And this volume builder allows us to do this with folders. So this is kind of like Photoshop. So you can say, well, I want this operation to happen inside the folder, and once we get all that figured out, then let's pass that along to whatever's below. So right now what I want to do is subtract in there, and let's just see if I can just make sure, let me turn on that one there. So I made this -20, and just so we can see what is happening, right? So you can see inside of there, that's where it's doing its cutting, and it's doing it right. It's just that because it's been shrunk in, it's shrinking from the bottom and the sides, but it's also shrinking from the top. So let's go back, and let's just put that back on center. And because I have a duplicate here, right, I have a loft with it, the loft cut, I'm just going to take the spline that's at the top, and I'm just going to move it up so it's tall enough. So you can see I get this perfectly hollowed out form of whatever thickness based on that dilation, right? Or erosion, I guess, at this point. So we have this loft is the outer surface, and then I made a duplicate of it. I just moved the top up a little bit so that when it gets shrunk down, it will cut through, and of course we get the top the way that we would want out of that. And there's so many things I could do. I could, in fact, let's go back and put that, where was that? This one was at 500, I think. Right, so I could do, leave that inside of there, and then I'll go ahead and create a cube. And we'll go ahead and make it big, like this, and I'll just make sure that it intersects the surface. And I'll put this, this in there. And let's look at our builder. And let's make this a subtract. So really what I've done is created a top for it. If I make this one bigger, you can see that, just kind of moving it up slowly. Let's make it a little bit higher. There we go. Right, so I'm cutting into that. But I could also use that as a cutter so that I get a top and a bottom out of it. But I'm going to leave it just as a cutter here at the top, right? So I have the original loft giving the outside. I have a duplicate of that that's being eroded and then subtracted inside this little folder, right? So these little, inside the folder I have a cutter, it's eroded, and then whatever that result is, it subtracts it from the surface, and then I just put a cube on top of it to subtract from there. I'm gonna make the 1.5 so I get tighter edges on this, which probably means I need to make my cutter a little bit bigger. There we go. And then the last thing within the builder, I'll probably just put a smooth right at the top, just to smooth it out just a little bit. And I always like 1 and 2. Right, so here's this interesting vessel form. The nice thing about this is it's still, I can go back and modify things. So if I wanted to, what was this one, 400? Let's make this one 250 by 250. 250. There we go. Because I had it such a high resolution, it took a little while to do that. But you can see I now get this new form out of that. There's even a fancier way I didn't want to get into is this cutter, I could have actually made a clone so that anything that I change of this would get reflected in the clone. I'll show that maybe in another video if you're interested. So that you really only have to modify it, but you can make lots of different variations of that form to see which one you would like one way or the other, right? So that's, I mean, it's interesting, and there's so many different things we could, this is just the beginning, right, of this, but we really only used 3 rectangles to kind of define how this surface was going to work one way or the other. All right, I think I'll call that good. So this will be part 2.